She sheltered a bleeding man during a storm, not knowing he was a feared Mafia boss who... Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. It was one of those nights that seemed like it had been made for a storm. The clouds hung low, threatening to burst open at any moment, and the wind howled through the empty streets of the city. Emma hadn't planned on being out in the middle of a downpour, but the late shift at the cafe had run long. She was exhausted, her legs aching from hours of standing and serving customers who hardly seemed to notice her. As she walked to her car, she pulled her jacket tighter against the biting wind, wishing only for the warmth of her small apartment and the comfort of her bed. The streets were nearly deserted as she hurried toward her car, the soft patter of rain drowning out the noise of the city. Her headlights flickered as she turned the corner, and then she saw him. A man, lying in the middle of the street, bleeding and barely conscious. His clothes were torn, and there was blood everywhere. Emma hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Her heart raced as she approached, but her instincts kicked in. She couldn't just leave him there. Without a second thought, she ran to his side, trying to keep the rain from soaking into the wounds that covered his chest and legs. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice shaking. The man's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, Emma thought he wasn't going to respond. Then, with effort, he whispered, "Help me, please." His voice was barely audible, but there was something in his eyes, something that made her heart skip a beat. She knew she had to help him, but as she tried to pull him to safety, her mind raced with questions. Who was this man? What had happened to him? And why was he here, in the middle of the street, with no one else around? She managed to get him into her car, her hands trembling as she tried to stop the bleeding. He winced every time she touched him, but he didn't make a sound. Emma didn't know where to take him. She couldn't just drive him to a hospital, not with the blood all over him and no idea who he was. Instead, she drove to her apartment, hoping that once he was inside, she could figure out what to do next. The storm was getting worse, the rain coming down in sheets, but Emma couldn't focus on anything except the man beside her. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change in a way she could never have imagined. The man, still unconscious, was a figure who had the power to destroy lives with a single word. He wasn't just anyone. He was a feared Mafia boss, someone whose enemies would stop at nothing to see him dead. And Emma? She had just sheltered him from the storm. The rain pounded against Emma's windows, the sound almost deafening as she carefully laid the man on her couch. She had to act quickly. His breathing was shallow, and the blood that had soaked his clothes was still seeping through the makeshift bandages she had managed to apply. He wasn't a stranger anymore. He was something else entirely. She had no idea who he really was, but there was a feeling in the pit of her stomach, a sense of danger she couldn't ignore. She needed to stop the bleeding, and fast. Emma worked as quickly as she could, her hands shaking as she grabbed medical supplies from her small first-aid kit. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Why had he been left there in the street? Who had done this to him? And why had he come to her? Her apartment was far from luxurious. It was small and cramped, a reflection of her life, a nurse working late hours, barely making ends meet. But tonight, it felt like a prison, the walls closing in as she tried to save a man she knew nothing about. She managed to stop most of the bleeding, but he was still unconscious. His injuries were too severe for her to handle alone. Emma stepped back for a moment, breathing heavily. She had to call someone who could help. But she hesitated. She had no idea who this man was, and the moment she reached out for help, she would be pulling herself deeper into a world she didn't understand. The clock ticked louder in the silence. The storm outside raged on, and Emma's anxiety was building. She couldn't explain it, but something told her that helping this man had already changed her life forever. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text message. She glanced at it, the name on the screen sending a jolt through her. It was from her best friend, Mia. "Are you okay? I saw the news. I hope you're safe." Emma froze for a moment, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. The news? What could the news have to do with her? She clicked on the message, and the headline flashed across her screen. Feared Mafia boss found bloodied on city streets. Authorities searching for leads. Her stomach dropped. The man on her couch. Was he the Mafia boss they were talking about? The realization hit her like a wave. Her heart began to pound, and she struggled to steady her breath. This wasn't just some random stranger. She had helped him, sheltered him, without knowing who he really was. Emma felt a knot tighten in her chest. She thought about running, about getting as far away as possible. But something deep inside her stopped her. This was bigger than her now. She couldn't turn back. The man stirred on the couch, and Emma's gaze snapped to him. His eyes fluttered open slowly, confusion and pain evident in them. For a moment, he didn't recognize her. His gaze shifted, taking in his surroundings, the unfamiliarity of it all. Then his eyes locked with hers, and Emma felt the intensity of them, like they could see straight through her. "Where am I?" His voice was rough, like he hadn't spoken in days. "You're safe for now," Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't know what else to say. The silence between them was heavy, filled with tension. He didn't say anything more at first, but she could feel his gaze never leaving her. The storm outside continued its assault on the world, but inside, it felt like time had stopped. "I owe you," he said after a long pause. His voice was low, almost like a promise. Emma swallowed, unsure of what to do next. "You owe me nothing," she said quickly. I just couldn't leave you out there." She tried to sound calm, but her voice wavered. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he watched her, as if trying to figure her out. Emma could feel the weight of his scrutiny, the air between them thick with an unspoken understanding. He was no ordinary man. His presence filled the room, and she knew he could destroy her life with a single word. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said suddenly, as though reading her mind. "But you should know, you've already stepped into something dangerous." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't want to know. The more she learned, the less she would be able to walk away. But deep down, she knew there was no going back. She had already made her choice the moment she decided to help him. He looked at her then, his eyes narrowing with a mix of curiosity and something else, something darker. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Emma swallowed again, trying to ignore the fear that rose in her chest. "I don't," she admitted. "But I don't need to. You're here now, and that's all that matters." For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with a strange half-smile, he spoke again. "You're right, but you will soon enough." Emma took a deep breath, her mind reeling with the knowledge that her life had just taken a turn she couldn't undo. The next morning, Emma woke up to the sound of rain tapping lightly against her window. The storm had passed, but a heavy tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts of the man lying unconscious on her couch just hours before. She hadn't expected to find herself in this situation, and yet, here she was, sitting in her small apartment with a man she barely knew, who was, apparently, a feared Mafia boss. She couldn't wrap her mind around it. Her life was simple: work, school, and barely enough time to breathe. But now, it seemed that the world she thought she knew had turned upside down. Emma stood up from her bed, her legs weak from the lack of sleep, and walked into the living room. The man, still asleep, looked peaceful for the first time since she found him in the street. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, the blood from his wounds now cleaned up and bandaged. She sighed, walking over to him, her eyes lingering on his face. He was handsome, too handsome, in a way that made her stomach flip. She had noticed the power in his presence, even in his weakened state. But what terrified her more was that power didn't just come from strength. It came from the way he commanded attention, the way his eyes seemed to pierce through her soul, as if he knew everything there was to know about her. Her phone buzzed suddenly, pulling her from her thoughts. She picked it up and saw a message from Mia, her best friend. "How's everything? Heard the news last night. Be careful." Emma's heart raced. The news. She had barely had time to process the events from the night before, and now she was being reminded of how dangerous this situation was. She quickly typed a reply. "I'm okay. I'll be fine. Just tired." She hit send before locking the phone and putting it back in her pocket. The man stirred slightly, his eyes blinking open slowly. He looked around, disoriented, before his gaze fell on Emma. For a moment, he didn't speak, just studied her as if calculating something in his mind. You're still here. His voice was rough, but there was a hint of amusement in it. I told you I wasn't going anywhere, Emma replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. He didn't respond at first, just sat up slowly, wincing slightly as he moved. Emma could see the pain in his eyes, but there was also something else, something cold and distant, as if he was shutting down the vulnerability of the moment. I owe you, he said again, his voice low but firm. Emma took a step back, not sure how to react. You owe me nothing, she replied, though her voice shook slightly. I just did what anyone would have done. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing as if he didn't believe her. Not everyone would have helped. Not everyone would have brought a bleeding stranger into their home. She didn't answer, not wanting to admit that she had done it out of impulse. There was something about him, something she couldn't explain, that made her want to help. She had been raised to help others, but this was different. This man wasn't just any stranger. The silence between them stretched on, thick with unspoken words. Finally, he broke it. My name is Luca, he said, his tone much softer now. Luca Romano. Emma froze. Romano. The name hit her like a slap, and her heart skipped a beat. Romano, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, watching her carefully. You heard of me, he asked. She didn't answer immediately, not sure what to say. I know the name, she said slowly, the words feeling foreign in her mouth. You're the Mafia boss. Luca's lips curled into a slight smile. Feared by some, he said, his tone laced with something almost amused. But not by you, it seems. Emma was silent for a moment, her mind trying to process the fact that the man in front of her, this powerful, dangerous man, was someone she had sheltered, helped without knowing who he was. I don't know what you want from me, she finally said, her voice shaking with the mix of fear and curiosity. I don't want anything from you, Luca replied, his expression serious now. But you need to understand something, Emma. You've become involved in my world whether you want to or not. His words sent a shiver down her spine. She didn't know what to say. Everything about this situation felt wrong, yet there was something undeniable about it. She had helped him, and now, her life was entangled in his. I don't want to be involved in anything dangerous, she said, her voice small, but firm. I just want to go back to my life. Luca stood up, wincing slightly as he did so. He looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. You don't get to choose that anymore, he said quietly. Once you've seen what you've seen, there's no going back. Emma felt the weight of his words settle heavily on her chest. She wanted to argue, to say that she could walk away, that she could forget everything. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. She had already made her choice by helping him. And now, there was no turning back. Emma stood frozen, the weight of Luca's words pressing down on her chest. You don't get to choose that anymore, he had said. Once you've seen what you've seen, there's no going back. Her mind was racing, trying to process the fact that the man lying on her couch, the one she had helped in the middle of the night, was a dangerous Mafia boss. The thought made her stomach churn, yet a part of her couldn't shake the curiosity about him. It had been hours since he woke up, and they hadn't spoken much since. He was sitting in her living room now, leaning against the wall with an air of quiet authority that sent a chill down her spine. She couldn't deny the pull he had on her, but she had no idea what that meant for her life moving forward. What do you want from me, Luca? Emma asked finally, her voice shaky but demanding an answer. Luca looked at her, his eyes piercing, as though he was contemplating whether to share more or not. I don't want anything from you, he said, though his tone was so controlled, Emma couldn't quite believe it. I'm just telling you the truth. You've already seen too much. You're already involved. Emma's mind whirled. I didn't choose this, she muttered under her breath. But Luca heard her, his sharp gaze never leaving her face. No one ever chooses, he said softly. But this is the reality now. His words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The rain continued to drum against the windows, a constant reminder of the storm that had brought him to her doorstep. Emma crossed her arms, trying to hold herself together. I don't know what you want me to do. I can't be a part of your world. I have a life. I have a future. This isn't me, she said, the panic rising in her chest. Luca's expression softened for a brief moment, almost imperceptibly, before he stood up slowly. He moved closer to her, his presence so overwhelming that she took a small step back. I'm not asking you to be a part of my world, Emma. he said, his voice low and steady. But whether you like it or not, you already are. You helped me, and now you're marked. Emma could feel the weight of his words settle into her bones. She wanted to fight it, too. Scream that she was nothing like the dangerous people he associated with. But she knew deep down that Luca was right. She had already stepped into a world of power, violence, and secrets. And once you were in, there was no way out. What does that even mean? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Luca didn't answer immediately. He took a step toward the window, his back to her. It means that you can't go back to your normal life, Emma. Not anymore. Not after what you've seen. His words cut through her like a knife, each one sealing her fate. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, a mix of fear and resignation. Luca turned around slowly, his eyes locked onto hers. I don't want you to do anything, he said. I just need you to understand the reality. You're safe, for now. But I can't guarantee how long that will last. You've already become a part of my world, whether you like it or not. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in on her. Emma swallowed hard, her throat dry. I never wanted this, she said, the words coming out in a rush. I never wanted to be part of any of this. Luca didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her, as though trying to decide if she was telling the truth. Then, with a slight nod, he spoke again. I know you didn't, but you are, and now you'll have to live with the consequences. He turned his back to her once again, walking toward the door. I'll leave you to think about it. But don't think for a second that you can just walk away. His voice was cold, final. Emma stood there in silence, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a decision that would change her life forever. Luca opened the door and walked out, leaving her alone in the apartment. The door clicked shut behind him, and Emma's legs gave way. She collapsed onto the couch, her mind spinning. What had she gotten herself into? The rain had stopped, but the storm in her mind raged on. The next few days passed in a blur for Emma. She couldn't escape the memory of Luca's words, and no matter how hard she tried to focus on her usual routine, everything kept pulling her back to him. She hadn't expected him to leave so abruptly, nor had she expected to feel so unsettled by his departure. She tried to convince herself that it was just a strange encounter, nothing more, but deep down, she knew that she couldn't just forget about him. The next morning, after Luca had walked out of her life, Emma found herself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. She looked like herself, tired, worn out, but there was something different. It was as though something had shifted inside her, something she couldn't quite explain. Her phone buzzed on the counter, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Mia. You good? Heard anything more about that guy? Emma stared at the message for a moment, unsure of how to respond. She couldn't tell Mia the truth, couldn't explain that the man she had helped was the very person the news outlets had been talking about. I'm fine, she typed back quickly. Just tired. I'll explain later. She hit send, but the nagging feeling in her chest didn't go away. What if Luca came back? What if he needed something from her? Or worse, what if his enemies found her? Emma tried to push those thoughts away. She had helped him, but she couldn't be dragged into his world. It was too dangerous. She couldn't let it define her life. But as the hours passed, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't over. The knock on her door came late in the afternoon. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was forceful, urgent, as though whoever was on the other side needed to get in. She froze. Her heart raced. She wasn't expecting anyone. With trembling hands, she opened the door. Standing there, framed by the dim light of the hallway, was Luca. This time, he wasn't injured. His face was calm, almost distant, but there was something in his eyes, something that made her feel both afraid and strangely drawn to him. We need to talk, he said, his voice steady and low. About what? Emma asked, though she already knew. She stepped aside, letting him in. As he passed, she couldn't help but notice the difference in him. His presence was more commanding now, more powerful. He had always been intimidating, but now, it was different. There was an edge to him, a sharpness in the way he carried himself. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was something more. I know you're scared, Lucas said, his voice cutting through the silence. But you need to understand that this world, my world, it doesn't let go so easily. Once you're in, you're in. Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. I didn't ask for this, she whispered, looking away. I didn't ask for any of this. Luca's eyes softened for a moment, but only briefly. I know, he said quietly. But now that you've seen me, there's no going back. Emma tried to steady herself, her hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. What do you want from me? She asked, the question almost escaping her lips before she could stop it. I don't want anything from you, Luca replied, his tone colder now. I'm here because you need to know the truth. You need to know who you're dealing with. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure. I don't want any part of this, she said, her voice shaking. I can't be a part of your world, Luca. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. You already are, he said, his voice low and firm. And now that you know what you know, there's no turning back. You've seen the danger I'm in. You've seen what's at stake. I can't afford to have you walk away. Emma felt the weight of his words settle over her. She had tried to ignore it, tried to pretend that she could go back to her normal life. But the truth was, she couldn't. She couldn't go back to the life she had before Luca. It was already too late for that. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. What does that mean for me? What do you want me to do? Luca's gaze never wavered. I'm not asking you to do anything, Emma. But I need you to understand that you're now part of this world. You're tied to it, whether you like it or not. His words were harsh, but there was something in them. Something that made Emma feel like she had no choice. She wasn't just helping a man anymore. She had unknowingly stepped into a world of power, danger, and secrets that she couldn't escape. I never wanted this, she said again, her voice barely audible. I just wanted to help. Luca stepped back, studying her with those cold, calculating eyes. I know you did, he said softly. But you helped me, and now I'm going to protect you. Whether you like it or not. Emma didn't know what to say to that. She had never asked for protection. She didn't want to be involved in his world. But somehow, she was already in it. And there was no way out. Emma spent the next few days in a haze, unable to shake the feeling that her life had been permanently altered. Luca's words echoed in her mind. She was now part of his world, whether she liked it or not. And as much as she tried to push it away, she knew he was right. There was no going back. The weight of his presence, the danger that followed him, was something she couldn't escape. She had helped him, and now she was entangled in something far bigger than she had ever imagined. Her days at the clinic continued, though they felt like an entirely different reality. Emma was barely focused, her mind constantly drifting back to Luca. His dark, calculating eyes, the power in his voice, the promise of protection that felt more like a threat than reassurance. The man had stepped into her life like a force of nature, and Emma had no choice but to go along for the ride. As the week wore on, she found herself spending more time at home, avoiding phone calls from her friends, and trying to avoid the unsettling thoughts of the dangerous world Luca had pulled her into. She kept telling herself it was just a strange incident, that it would pass, but deep down, she knew better. Luca wasn't going to let her forget. The knock on her door came again, just as the evening settled in. It was Luca, standing in the hallway, his presence filling the space with an almost palpable tension. We need to talk, he said, his voice low and steady. Emma's heart skipped a beat. About what? She asked, already dreading the answer. Luca stepped inside, without waiting for her to invite him. His gaze never left her as he crossed the threshold. About your future, he said, his voice as cold as ever. And about the people who won't stop looking for me. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had been hoping, praying, that he would leave her out of whatever chaos was swirling around him. But it was clear now that wasn't going to happen. You don't need to be involved, she said, her voice trembling. You don't need to bring me into this. Luca's lips curled into a slight smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're already involved, Emma. You can't just walk away. He paused, studying her with a look that seemed to pierce through to her very soul. But I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to make sure you understand what you've gotten yourself into. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luca took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. You've seen me at my worst, he said quietly. You've seen the blood, the danger, the power I wield. And now that you've seen it, you need to understand that there's no turning back. People in my world don't forget, and they don't let go easily. He stepped back, giving her space to breathe. I can't protect you forever, but I can offer you something that will help keep you safe. A choice. Emma's mind raced. A choice, she echoed. What kind of choice? Luca's gaze softened just slightly, though his voice remained firm. You stay with me. You accept the protection I offer. You live in my world, under my rules. Or you walk away, and I can't promise you'll make it out unscathed. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. The choice felt impossible. She didn't want this life. She didn't want to be a part of his dangerous world. But she also knew that walking away wasn't a real option. Luca wasn't someone who let people go once they were involved. And if I choose to stay? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Luca's eyes darkened, and the tension in the room grew thicker. If you stay, you'll be protected. But you'll also be tied to me. Everything that comes with my world, my enemies, my alliances, my battles, it will be yours, too. Emma swallowed hard. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, her voice shaking. I don't know if I can live with this. Luca's expression softened for a moment, and he took a step closer to her. I understand, he said quietly. This isn't easy, Emma. But it's the only way. Emma looked up at him, her mind a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. She didn't want to be involved in his world, but Luca had made it clear there was no easy escape. She had already seen too much, and the only way out was through him. I need time, she said, her voice trembling. I need time to think about this. Luca nodded, his expression unreadable. I'll give you time, he said, his voice softening. But you need to understand one thing. Whether you choose to stay or go, you're already mine. And there's nothing that can change that. He turned and walked toward the door, leaving Emma standing in the middle of the room, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she would soon have to make. The days that followed were clouded with uncertainty. Emma found herself constantly replaying Luca's words in her mind, each one heavier than the last. She had to make a choice, stay in his world, with all its danger and darkness, or walk away and risk everything she had built for herself. But walking away wasn't an option. Not really. Not when the danger wasn't just Luca, but the enemies he faced, the ones who would surely come for her if she tried to leave. The weight of that truth settled heavily in her chest as she moved through her daily life, her interactions at work feeling distant and disconnected. The once familiar routine now felt like a fragile mask she wore to hide from the storm that was Luca. It wasn't just the Mafia world that kept her up at night, but the emotional pull Luca had on her. It was something deeper than just fear. His presence had become a strange comfort, even though he was a constant reminder of everything she didn't want. Emma couldn't explain it. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her want to stay, despite the danger. But was it really just attraction? Or was it something else, something far more complicated? That afternoon, as she worked in the clinic, she received a message from Luca. We need to talk, it said, and she felt a pang of both dread and anticipation. She had been expecting it, of course. But now, facing the reality of seeing him again, she wasn't sure she was ready. She had been trying to think things through, trying to come to terms with the decision she knew she had to make. But everything was clouded by his influence. As soon as her shift ended, Emma made her way home, her mind heavy with the weight of the conversation that awaited her. When she arrived, Luca was already waiting outside her apartment building, leaning against the wall, his posture casual, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. His presence seemed to fill the space around them, and Emma's heart skipped a beat. We need to get this over with, he said as she approached, his voice low, but not unkind. She didn't answer immediately, just nodded and let him inside. Once inside her apartment, she could feel the storm brewing between them. You've had time to think, Luca said, his eyes never leaving hers. I hope you've made your decision. Emma stood by the door, the weight of his gaze pressing down on her. I don't know what to do, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can be part of this world. Luca didn't move, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. You're already part of it, he said quietly. You've seen what I'm capable of. You know what's at stake. You can't just walk away from that. His words hit her like a slap, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. He was right. She had already seen too much. She had already made her choice, even if she hadn't fully realized it yet. What if I don't want to be part of it? She asked, her voice shaking. What if I just want to walk away and live a normal life? Luca's expression softened, but only slightly. You think you can do that? After everything? He asked, his tone still calm, but there was a hardness in it. There's no such thing as a normal life when you've crossed into this world, Emma. It's too late for that. She shook her head, feeling the tears well up in her eyes. I never asked for this, she whispered. I never wanted to be involved in this. Lucas stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. I know you didn't, he said softly. But you're already in it. And now, you need to make a choice. You either stay, or you run. But you can't keep pretending you're not part of it. Emma felt her heart race. There was no easy answer, no right choice. The thought of running, of leaving everything behind, was tempting. But she knew it wasn't possible. Not with the people who were already watching her. What happens if I stay? She asked, her voice barely audible. Luca's lips curled into a slight smile. If you stay, you'll be protected. I'll keep you safe. But you'll be under my protection, under my rules. You'll be a part of my world, whether you like it or not. Emma swallowed hard. And if I leave? Luca's expression hardened again. You leave, and you'll never be the same. You'll never be free of this world. You'll always be a target. And if you try to run, you won't make it far. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, trying to push back the tears that threatened to spill. She didn't want this. She didn't want to be a part of Luca's world. But she already was. And running was no longer an option. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes. I'll stay, she said, her voice steady but filled with fear. But on my terms. I'll stay, but I need to feel like I'm not just your prisoner. Luca nodded slowly, his gaze softening slightly. I can do that, he said quietly. But understand this, Emma, you're mine now. And I will do whatever it takes to protect you. The days after Emma made her choice felt like a blur, her life now wrapped in layers of uncertainty. She had agreed to stay, to be a part of Luca's world, but what did that truly mean? As the days passed, she tried to adjust to the new reality of her life, the life she had never wanted but now couldn't escape. Luca was constantly there, in her apartment, in her thoughts, and as much as she told herself that she was making the right decision, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had already crossed a line by helping him, by becoming entangled in his world. But with every passing day, the stakes grew higher. He was everywhere, watching over her, his presence a constant reminder of how little control she had over her own life. She had agreed to stay, but at what cost? It wasn't just his power that unsettled her. It was the way he seemed to slip into her world without even trying. He had a way of making her feel safe and terrified at the same time. His presence was always just a step away, a watchful eye on her, his voice in her head. She couldn't escape him, even if she wanted to. But that was the point, wasn't it? She wasn't meant to escape. I need to talk to you, Luca said one evening, his voice sharp but not angry. Emma looked up from the dinner she had been preparing, her hands trembling slightly. It wasn't the first time he had spoken to her like this, but the edge in his tone made her stomach tighten. What about? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It's about your safety, he replied, stepping closer to her. I told you when you decided to stay that things would change. But you haven't seen the full picture yet. You need to understand what it really means to be involved in my world. Emma's heart raced, her mind already preparing for what he was about to say. I thought I understood, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. But you don't, he said, his gaze darkening. This is bigger than just us, Emma. There are people who would use you against me, people who would stop at nothing to get to me. And now, they know you. They know who you are. Emma's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean? She asked, her voice shaking. I'm not asking you to be a part of this, Lucas said, stepping closer, his tone softer now. But by staying, you've already made yourself a target. I can protect you, but you need to understand the consequences of your decision. There are people who will come for you. People who will stop at nothing to destroy everything I've built. Emma swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy fog. She had already made her choice, but now the reality of what that choice meant was beginning to sink in. She had known there would be danger, but she hadn't realized how deep it went, how far the reach of Luca's world extended. I don't know if I can handle this, she whispered, the fear creeping into her voice. I don't know if I can live with the constant threat. Luca placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle, but his eyes fierce. You won't be alone in this, he said, his voice steady. I'll be with you every step of the way. I'll protect you, but you have to trust me. Emma looked up at him, her heart torn between fear and something else she couldn't name. I don't trust anyone, she said, her voice breaking. Not anymore. Luca's gaze softened, and for a moment, she saw something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before, vulnerability. I understand, he said quietly. But you'll have to learn to trust me, Emma. There's no other way. The silence between them hung heavy, and Emma found herself searching Luca's face for something, anything, that would make her believe him. But all she saw was determination, the same cold, calculated look that had first drawn her to him. And she realized then that she was in too deep. She had already given him a part of herself that she couldn't take back, no matter how much she wanted to. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Luca's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of something deeper, something more than just power or control. "Now," he said softly, "we move forward. Together." Emma swallowed, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. She wasn't just in his world anymore. She was a part of it, and the only way out was through him. The days that followed her decision to stay in Luca's world were a blur of confusion and fear, but also something else, something she couldn't name. Emma had promised herself she would stay out of this, that she would maintain her independence, but the closer she grew to Luca, the more she realized that wasn't going to happen. She was already too deeply involved. The nights were the worst, when she was alone in her small apartment with nothing but her thoughts and the knowledge that Luca was out there, always watching, always waiting. Every time she heard a car pull up outside, every knock on the door, her heart would race. Was it him? Or was it someone else? Someone who might come to finish what had started that stormy night. She tried to ignore it. She tried to focus on work, on the things that had once mattered to her. But Luca's presence lingered in every part of her life. She couldn't shake it. And then, one evening, Luca appeared at her door again. His usual cold, calculating demeanor was present, but this time, there was something different. There was an urgency in the way he looked at her, an edge to his movements. "We need to move," he said immediately, his voice tense. Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Move?" she repeated, confused. "What do you mean?" Luca stepped inside, without waiting for her to invite him. He was already looking around the apartment, his eyes scanning the surroundings like he was expecting danger to come through the door at any moment. "It's not safe here anymore," he said, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her stomach twist. "You're a target now, Emma. I should have realized it sooner, but now they know you're with me." Emma's pulse quickened, fear flooding her body. "Who knows?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Luca turned to her, his gaze sharp. "My enemies. The people who want me dead. They don't care who gets hurt in the process. You're a liability now." Emma felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "Why would they come after me?" Luca let out a frustrated sigh. "Because you helped me. Because you're tied to me now. The moment you stepped into my world, you became a target." Emma's chest tightened. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't ask for any of it." Luca stepped closer, his gaze softening, though there was still a hard edge to his voice. "I know you didn't, but it's too late to go back." The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken words. Emma felt trapped, caught in a life she had never chosen, but now couldn't escape. "Where do we go?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Luca looked at her for a long moment before answering. "We need to leave the city. Go somewhere safe. They'll be watching the city for the next few days, but once we're gone, they'll be harder to track." Emma's mind was spinning. "How can I just leave everything behind?" she whispered. "My life, my job, my friends." Luca reached out, his hand gently brushing her arm, as if trying to reassure her. "I know it's hard, but we don't have a choice. If you stay here, they'll find you, and it won't be pretty." Emma's heart was racing. She didn't want to leave everything behind. But what choice did she have? She had already stepped into a world where there were no easy choices, no guarantees. "Okay," she said, her voice steady, though the uncertainty in her heart was almost overwhelming. "I'll go." Luca nodded, his face softening for the first time in what felt like days. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'll protect you, Emma. I promised you that." But even as he spoke the words, Emma knew there was no way to truly protect herself in his world. It was a world full of darkness, where danger lurked around every corner. A world where trust was a luxury and betrayal was a certainty. They left the apartment that night, Emma's heart heavy with the weight of everything she was leaving behind. She had no idea where they were going, only that she had no choice but to follow him. As they drove away from the city, the lights of New York slowly fading in the rearview mirror, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled deeper into something she could never escape. Emma sat silently in the passenger seat of Luca's car, the rain still falling outside as the city slowly disappeared in the rearview mirror. The weight of the decision she had just made settled heavily in her chest. She had left behind everything: her job, her life in the city, the familiar rhythm of her routine. And for what? To follow a man who was tangled in a dangerous, violent world. To trust him when everything in her told her she shouldn't. But in that moment, as they drove farther from the city, Emma realized there was no turning back. She was in too deep now, tied to Luca and the world he inhabited. The quiet between them was thick with unsaid words, and Emma couldn't help but glance over at him, trying to gauge what he was thinking. He hadn't said much since they left her apartment, his attention focused on the road, his jaw clenched in thought. The tension in the car was palpable, but, for some reason, Emma felt a strange sense of comfort in it. There was something about Luca that made her feel safe, even though he was the very reason she was on the run. His presence, his calm, unwavering demeanor, it was all she had now. No matter how much she wanted to deny it, she had come to rely on him. The car slowed as they approached a small, secluded cabin hidden deep in the woods, far from the prying eyes of the city. Emma looked around, unsure of what to expect. This wasn't what she had imagined when she agreed to follow him. The place was quiet, isolated, and somehow, that made it feel even more dangerous. "This is where we'll stay for now," Lucas said, his voice low, as though he was sensing her unease. "It's safe here, at least for a while." Emma nodded, but her stomach twisted. Safe? How could she feel safe when she was with a man who had just admitted that people were hunting him down? They had barely stopped the car when Luca turned to her. "I know this isn't what you expected," he began, his eyes steady on hers. "But we need to lay low. No more contact with anyone, not yet. If they find us, it's over." Emma swallowed hard. "How long do we stay here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luca's gaze softened for just a moment. "As long as it takes," he said. "I won't risk you being hurt." The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. He was willing to do whatever it took to protect her, even if that meant hiding away in a place like this. Emma wasn't sure if she was relieved or terrified. Luca opened the door and stepped out of the car, motioning for her to follow. The cabin was small but well kept, tucked away in the trees. Inside, it was quiet, the only sound the crackling of the fire in the stone hearth. Emma followed Luca inside, trying to adjust to the sudden change in scenery, the sudden shift in her life. She was no longer just Emma, the girl who worked late shifts and lived in a small apartment in the city. Now, she was someone else, someone in Luca's world. And that world was full of danger. Luca disappeared into another room, leaving Emma standing in the living room, feeling the weight of her decision settle even further into her bones. She wasn't just running from the city anymore. She was running from everything she had known, everything that had once defined her. And now, she was part of something much bigger than she had ever imagined. When Luca returned, he held a glass of water in his hand. "You need to rest," he said, his voice softer now. "You've been through a lot." Emma took the glass from him, her hands shaking slightly as she took a sip. Her mind was still reeling from the sudden turn her life had taken, but she knew there was no going back. She had already made her choice. She had stayed, and now, she had to live with the consequences. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Luca sat beside her, his presence calm and steady as ever. "You don't have to do it alone," he said softly. "I'm here. And I'll make sure nothing happens to you." His words should have reassured her, but they didn't. The fear was still there, the uncertainty. But there was something in the way he spoke, the way he held himself, something that made her believe he might actually be able to protect her. "What happens if they find us?" Emma asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What if they come after me?" Luca's expression hardened, his jaw clenched. "I won't let them hurt you," he said firmly. "You're mine now, Emma, and I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe." His words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. Emma couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to run, to escape before things got worse. But the other part of her, the part that had grown attached to Luca in the short time they had spent together, couldn't leave. Not now. Not when she had already chosen this life, this dangerous world. She had already crossed the line. And now, there was no turning back. The next few days in the cabin felt like a strange, suspended moment in time. Emma couldn't remember the last time she'd felt truly safe. And yet, despite the constant weight of fear in her chest, there was a strange comfort in the isolation. It was just her and Luca now, far from the chaos of the city, but the constant knowledge that the threat of danger loomed over them made every second feel like a ticking clock. Luca had become her protector, but as much as she tried to trust him, she couldn't shake the uncertainty. She didn't belong here. This wasn't her world. The quiet was overwhelming, the silence between them stretching longer each day. Luca kept his distance, giving her space, but Emma couldn't ignore the tension that pulsed between them. It was like a storm that hadn't yet broken, and she couldn't decide whether she was waiting for it to pass or for it to consume her entirely. Every night, as she lay in the bed in the small room, the sound of Luca moving around the cabin kept her awake. He was always vigilant, always watching, always alert. There was no escaping it. This was his life now, and whether she liked it or not, it was hers too. But Luca's presence was not only about protection, there was something else. Something more complicated than just fear. Something that pulled Emma deeper into his world with each passing moment. She tried not to think about it, tried to push the thoughts away, but it was impossible. The attraction she felt for him, the way he made her feel both safe and terrified at the same time, it was too much to ignore. It was a dangerous game they were playing, and Emma had no idea what the stakes were. The days began to blend together, the constant tension between them hanging like a thick fog. But that all changed when Luca suddenly turned to her one evening. His eyes, usually guarded and calculating, were intense. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice low, almost urgent. Emma looked up, her heart racing. "What is it?" she asked, dreading the answer. Luca was standing by the window, his back to her, his gaze fixed on the trees outside. "They know where we are," he said, his voice steady but tinged with an undercurrent of warning. Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Who knows?" she asked, her pulse quickening. "My enemies," Luca replied, turning to face her. "They've been watching us, and they won't stop until they get what they want." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "What do they want from you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luca's eyes darkened, and for a moment, there was a coldness in them that sent a chill down her spine. "Everything," he said quietly. "They want control, power. They want to see me fall." Emma swallowed hard, trying to process what he was saying. "What does that mean for me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Luca's expression softened, but the intensity in his gaze never wavered. "It means that you're in danger, Emma," he said, his voice steady. "As long as you're with me, you're a target. They'll do anything to hurt me, and if that means hurting you, they won't hesitate." Emma felt the room closing in on her, the walls seemingly pressing in from all sides. "I never asked for this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never wanted any of this." Luca took a step closer to her, his eyes softer now, but still filled with the weight of everything that was at stake. "I know," he said quietly, "but this is where we are now, and I will do whatever it takes to protect you. I won't let them hurt you, Emma." She looked up at him, her chest tight with emotion. The weight of his words sank in, and for the first time since this all began, Emma realized just how deeply she had fallen into Luca's world. She wasn't just involved now, she was part of it. And no matter how much she wanted to run, there was nowhere to go. She was stuck. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Luca's expression softened, and for a moment, he seemed almost vulnerable. "You don't have to do it alone," he said gently. "I'm here, and I'll protect you. Always." But even as he spoke those words, Emma knew that she was no longer just a bystander. She was a part of the world Luca had pulled her into, and no matter how hard she tried to resist it, there was no way out. The only choice now was to trust him, to stay. But as Luca pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, Emma couldn't help but wonder if it was already too late. Was there any way to stay safe in a world that was so dangerous, so full of darkness? Or had she already crossed the line from which there was no return? The days bled into one another as Emma settled into a life she never imagined. The cabin in the woods was far from the chaos of the city, but the isolation only made her feel more vulnerable. Luca kept his word. He was always there, always watching, always present. But despite his promises to protect her, the fear never left. She couldn't forget that his world was dangerous. The people after him were ruthless, and she was now a target because of him. The silence of the woods didn't offer the peace she had hoped for. Instead, it served as a constant reminder of her situation. Every creak in the floorboards, every gust of wind that rattled the windows, made her jump, as if the threat of danger was just outside, waiting to pounce. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, Luca approached her with a look she couldn't decipher. His usual stoic expression was replaced by something else, something darker. "We need to move again," he said, his voice clipped. Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, already dreading the answer. "They're closer now," Luca replied, glancing toward the window as though the enemies he spoke of might appear at any moment. "I can feel it." Emma's stomach dropped. "So, we're running again?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luca's gaze softened, but his resolve was unwavering. "We don't have a choice. They're closing in on us. I need to make sure you're safe, and right now, that means leaving this place behind." The reality of their situation hit her like a punch to the gut. They were always on the move, always running from something. Luca had promised her protection, but there were no guarantees in his world, no promises that could erase the danger that hung over them. "How long will we keep running?" Emma whispered, her heart heavy with the thought of never being able to settle, to have a normal life again. Luca paused for a moment, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of regret and determination. "As long as it takes," he said quietly. "Until they stop coming for us. Until it's safe." But how could it ever be safe in his world? She knew deep down it couldn't. She had seen too much already, and she couldn't pretend that she hadn't crossed a line from which there was no return. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was involved, tied to him in a way that she couldn't escape. The thought of leaving, of breaking free, lingered in her mind, but every time she considered it, the fear of what would happen to her if she did was enough to keep her rooted in place. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Lucas stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "I know you are," he said softly, "but you don't have to face this alone." His hand reached out, resting gently on her arm, offering her the comfort she needed but wasn't sure she could accept. "I'll protect you. I'll make sure nothing happens to you. But we have to stick together." Emma felt the weight of his promise settle over her like a blanket. He wanted to protect her, but how could he? How could anyone protect her from a world like his? And yet, as she looked into his eyes, she saw something in them. Something real, something that told her maybe, just maybe, he meant what he said. The silence stretched between them, neither of them speaking, but both understanding the gravity of the situation. There was no way out for her. Not anymore. "Okay," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll stay." Luca nodded, a small but satisfied smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Good," he said. "We move at dawn. Pack only what you need." Emma turned away, her heart heavy, her mind racing with the thought of what would come next. She had chosen this life, but at what cost? The choice she had made was the only choice she could make to survive. And now, she would have to live with it. As she packed her few belongings, she couldn't help but wonder if there was any chance of escaping this world, if there was any way to return to the life she had once known. But deep down, she knew there wasn't. This was her life now, whether she liked it or not. She was a part of his world, a part of the darkness that surrounded him, and there was no going back. She just hoped she could survive it. The morning light barely pierced through the thick trees surrounding the cabin as Emma packed the last of her things. She had become accustomed to the cold isolation of the woods, the heavy silence that seemed to press down on her at all hours. She was no longer the same person who had arrived here days ago, unsure of what would come next. She had made her choice, and though she wasn't sure what lay ahead, she knew there was no turning back now. Luca's presence had become both a comfort and a burden. His protection kept her safe from the constant threat of danger, but it also trapped her in his world, a world of secrets, power, and violence that she didn't belong to. Yet, in his eyes, she saw something else, something she couldn't ignore. He wasn't just a mafia boss. He was someone who cared, in his own way, and that made everything more complicated. As they drove down the narrow, winding road that led them further away from the cabin, Emma couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and anticipation. She didn't know where they were going next, but the fact that Luca had brought her with him meant that whatever it was, they would face it together. There was no more hiding. No more pretending she could escape this life. It was hers now, for better or worse. The car slowed as they entered a small, secluded town. It was quiet, the streets empty except for a few scattered people going about their business. They pulled into a small, nondescript building that looked like any other in the area. "We're safe here for now," Lucas said, his voice steady, but there was a hint of something darker beneath it. Emma could tell he was on edge. They got out of the car, and Luca led her inside, the door creaking as it opened. The building was simple, furnished with just the basics, but it was clean and secure. "This will do for now," Lucas said, looking around the room, his eyes scanning every corner, every exit. Emma followed him inside, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. She had always known that her life with Luca would be dangerous, but now, more than ever, she realized just how much danger she was truly in. "Luca," she said, her voice breaking through the tense silence. "How long will we stay here?" He turned to face her, his eyes softening just a little. "As long as it takes," he replied. "Until it's safe." Emma looked around the room, feeling the weight of his words. How could she ever feel safe in a world like his? A world where there was always a threat, always someone lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. She had become a part of that world, and she couldn't escape it now. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, the fear and uncertainty rising in her chest. Luca took a step toward her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. "I'll protect you. I won't let anything happen to you." His words, meant to reassure her, did little to calm her nerves. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But the truth was that she was scared. Scared of the life she had chosen. Scared of the people who would stop at nothing to destroy Luca and anyone who was close to him. "But what if something happens to you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if they come after you?" Luca's expression hardened. "I'll deal with that," he said firmly. "You don't need to worry about me. I'm used to this life. I've been in this world for a long time." Emma swallowed hard, her heart aching with the knowledge that she was caught in a battle that was bigger than both of them. "And me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens to me?" Lucas stepped closer, his hand still resting on her shoulder, his thumb gently brushing her skin. "You'll be fine," he said softly. "As long as you're with me, I'll make sure you're safe. No one will hurt you." Emma looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. But there was nothing. His eyes were steady, unflinching. He truly believed what he was saying. And for the first time in days, Emma felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this. Maybe they could escape the darkness that surrounded them. But even as she clung to that hope, a part of her knew that nothing was ever certain in Luca's world. There would always be danger. There would always be people who wanted to tear them apart. But for now, as she stood there in that small, nondescript building with Luca by her side, Emma made a decision. She would trust him. She would stay, and she would face whatever came next, together. In this gripping story of dark romance, Emma's life takes a dramatic turn when she unknowingly shelters a bleeding man, only to discover that he is a feared mafia boss. As she becomes entangled in his dangerous world, her struggle to escape the shadows grows stronger, yet she finds herself drawn deeper into the turmoil. With each passing day, Emma is forced to face the complexities of loyalty, trust, and survival in the unforgiving realm of dark romance. Luca, the mafia boss, promises to protect her, but the stakes are high, and danger lurks at every corner. Their relationship is a tumultuous journey, filled with tension, fear, and unexpected emotions. Will Emma be able to navigate this dark romance without losing herself, or will she be consumed by the very world she never wanted to be a part of? The intense connection between Emma and Luca offers a unique blend of passion, danger, and power, where every choice could lead to life or death. The dark romance they share is fraught with peril, but also undeniable attraction. Will they survive the forces threatening to tear them apart, or will the darkness swallow them whole? This dark romance story takes you on a roller coaster of emotions, where love and danger intertwine, leaving readers craving more.